Thank you very much for the invitation. We are very proud for doing a lecture here, and I have to say it is a kind of a risky, sharp subject. This of talking with someone here we can't see, but he's here, and he's our friend, and our friend today are the savings account, and how the architects ourselves can build with a new notion of architecture from that concept. As Leb said, we were born in Buenos Aires at the late 90s, and at the beginning of the new century we were studying our undergraduate studies. In the year 2001, there was an institutional and economical crisis in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, that resulted in the crack of the banking systems. So the banks literally stole people's savings by doing a financial yard, a corral, to their deposits due to wrong economic policies. So the result of this was a massive loss of confidence from the people in the financial institutions, and of course the disappearance of the mortgage loans that finance all basically the development of our habitat. So post that year, 2001, we graduated, and we had the chance to do a competition that we won. It was a student competition that allowed us to obtain a scholarship and to study in Europe. So we decided to study in Spain. We wanted to do our postgraduate studies in Barcelona, but we wanted to live in Madrid. That was kind of difficult situation, but we delivered, and we knew that both cities had something that was necessary for us. Then that figure that in the very beginning of the century, Spain was a very powerful architecture culture, but we understood when we finished our period as postgraduate students, we understood that the resurgence of our country opened a series of possibilities to develop. So to be more specific with the subject of this presentation, we're going to talk about our relationship with him, the savings account, that if for many reasons in Buenos Aires are very different from other countries. So this crisis in the market, after the crisis in the market, the resurgence was based in three main reasons. One is that the crisis sank the value of properties. So at the beginning of the mid 2005, the properties went down in prices. Then the second is that a segment of the society still had the chance to generate savings. And for the third, that the banks were completely out of the productive system of the market of buildings. But these three conditions were very specific to that critical situation, and at the same time, they were not the only engine, because our society has other characteristics that are very structural when we evaluate its development. For instance, Argentina, in Argentina, every crisis happens every 7 to 10 years. So that's a kind of historical and psychological record for ourselves, because we are waiting for the next crisis. So that is a kind of difficult situation to deal with. Then the second thing is important that people in our country save their money in a foreign currency. We don't think because we have a very weak currency. So we mainly think in another currency, mainly in dollars. And then that the properties are historically assimilated as a form of investment for the common people. So that is very important to understand why people, especially the middle class, develop their own way to achieve a place to live or just to deposit their earnings. So based on private ways of social organizations, the machine that moves mainly the real estate market started to run again. But that said, the first question is why architecture? Because what I'm talking about is mainly about real estate and business that not always comes together with architecture. And it's important to understand that in this socio-economical context, but also in this city that we see in the image, that we can see that physiognomy is a city that is like a very hybrid situation, with very big streets full of trees. Some plots are like a little bit here. Here. Some plots are very small, so you have very deep and narrow plots that you can add if you need more surface. And you have some of them that are occupied by houses, but other by very tall buildings. Some of them are for domestic life, and some are tertiary. Some of them are for industry. So we understood that our work should transcend the traditional task of the architect and become explorers in search of opportunities in this city. And the city, with its particular conditions, was a perfect soil to develop an organized new way of inhabiting and grow. So these small plots with very low prices, or those roofs that you can see there, with old houses below and a lot of air over it. But the main important thing is all this infrastructure mixed with this vegetation that shape a perfect place to inhabit. So we know that if we could align the society needs with our private ambitions, our agenda, the product conceived would be the crystallization of very genuine conditions. So we are going to show you now the way each project we developed grows in this environment.
So it's very important to, under these circumstances, to ask what to do, and at the same time where we have to do it. So those questions are creative questions of the same tenor. We maybe behave ourselves in the beginning like a landscape painter, like they did maybe 500 years ago, who walks with his canvas and looking for interesting landscape, and at certain moment he stops and say, okay, that's what I want to paint. So this is our point of view, and we believe that setting a point of view is the first project action. We like to describe this landscape as new plots that are floating in the air, that in reality are infrastructure leftovers. For us, they are very privileged places because they are in very close relation to the sky, which is the only natural element that you can find in that extensive environment. So you only know that you find a new point of view when you can make a redescription of this environment. This is behind those plants is the pavilion I want to talk about. The pavilion sets back from the edge of the building in order to create a perimeter of plants that filters the light. We designed the same structural, we have the same structural design for two kind of places. Here this filtered exterior, and also we have a gardener interior. Its simplicity puts it closer to a new version of Lucia primitive hut, which is not built on the soil, but on the top of the city, in the middle of it, with no urban references, with no preset rules or use, just more like a natural oasis related to a new kind of hedonism. Sometimes imperfect places like this discontinuity in the urban fabric can develop new opportunities. Again, what we see there, it's a new pavilion on the top of an existing house. So we are not working on an empty plot, and we are not working with any precise use. We use a very malleable element to absorb every accident, so the discontinuity of the neighbor's wall stimulates its formalization of this shadow device. This is how this device takes the higher wall, and we are trying to use the same attitude in the previous project relating to obsolete infrastructure. What we see here, it's an old water tank that if we remove the top cover, now we can call it a pool floating in the air. This is how the city changes looking through the project. We as architects, we are able to build passive machines that produce momentary alteration of the weather. We don't need too much matter to do so. We can create a breeze that goes over there. We can cool down the air. We can bring the vegetation humidity inside. We can do all that with very cheap materials. So there is a totally different approach of traditional construction techniques. It's not like building a wall and then adding a window. Here, the elements start to share responsibilities, and that's why they start to become lighter. We can have this totally glass room just because we have a shadow device on top of it. This is the intermediate place with the new weather I was talking about. Maybe there's also another idea over there that we think that as architects we need to develop a new idea of luxury, that it's not related to expensive materials and not related to exclusive locations. So again, those are the plots I'm talking about. There are not expected places to build on, but sometimes you need to look for unexpected places to project unexpected ways of living. So this pavilion presents itself just like a ghost roof, a roof that the house never had. So now our earth crust is the urban fabric. If you work on an artificial topography, you can find sloping new ground in pampas, extremely plain soil. This continuous and sloping roof that we see over there it's a reaction to this condition. Again, the typical house already exists, as we can see there. So we are only adding a big room with no specific use, structured by 3 patios, the one on your left, the other behind, and the third in front of us. So this metal mesh and glass and the concrete floor and the same steel structure tend to dilute the differences between interior and exterior, just to make to live floating inside the block. So finally, when you manage to confirm the fertility of this new territory, and you finish understanding the hidden potentialities that it contains, it's time to look to the big picture again. We believe that the air plots are key elements to develop a new kind of social houses. What we see here is a strategy that explodes the isolated housing block and prevents at the same time the ghettification. It's a strategy that promotes social integration through integration of different architectures. Just like the mutualism in Animal Kingdom, it's completely necessary to generate a new contract between the 2 parties. So the new inhabitants can be integrated into a consolidated social network, while the owners of the existing homes benefit from the air rights. Urban activity can grow by incorporating housing in service areas. You can see how the plants grow at the same time that the roof of the existing house grows. Or the elderly can avoid moving from houses where they were formed their family by adding new life on their rooftops. As you can see in this image, we don't believe that social architecture really exists. The architecture we propose here is identical to the previous one. What we do really believe is that there is a potential of social change in the detection of new territories.
Okay, so if the first chapter Marcelo was talking about is about finding new plots in the air where apparently there weren't, then this new chapter is about how we can find, or how can we subdivide and find new plots inside the other plots. But this to happen, you have to have some affections between the actors inside the same plot. So these 2 small projects that we are going to present can exist because of the solidarity of the families. In these cases, the families were able to share part of their heritage with their children by contributing with a piece of land and with part of the needed budget. So here we are replacing the first initial investment with the contribution of the family. The first project we are going to show you is this one. If it works, yes, it works. It's this one that is in Floresta, which is a hybrid neighborhood in the southwest of Buenos Aires, which is a mix of a small and low impact industry with domestic life. As you can see in the neighborhood here, you can have a production factory in the ground floor, and then upstairs it's the own home of the family. In this case, with these deep and narrow plots, we have the factory for the family. At the back. In the front, we had an old house that was demolished. It's demolished to leave a space for the ground for the now grown children's new house. So the new plot is now inside another plot. So the subdivision is now for the original property. So this is a narrow building with a vertical growth. We are inserting, we are doing an insert of a new density it's very small density, but it's a new density in the plot. And now the family shares in the same plot their work and the two houses for their grown children. So ground floor, they have a shared place with spaces for cars and the place where people and workers go to the back of the plot for the factory. But also they have their lemon tree that was very important for the family. This lemon tree was a micro landscape episode that was very significant for the family because they had their days below the trees because of the fruit, and that was for us like the beginning of a dialogue that is a dialogue of form and a dialogue of colors and the atmosphere of this small courtyard. But also we knew that for this construction that was very, very economic, we had to build with a material palette that can resist long terms without maintenance. And another terms of economy, like this narrow building with this connection for the air. And also the economy of media is always the best path to be economic. An intermediate space between the street and the house, because the house is very near the street, so we step back and we use this mesh to have some intimacy and protection from the street. And then in the roof, which is the place where both brothers and their children earn their domestic life in contact with the sky and the city landscape. In a similar essay for these houses that dialogue in a new plot, in an existing plot, is for this house, which is in this case the new house is at the front of their parents' existing house, just where the garage was located. So now, if in the house I explained before, there was a kind of critical situation because work and a factory lives all day with a domestic life. In this case, is how to live between two families that needs to be together because of the contingency of life, but they also needs their own intimacy. So this is a typical suburban situation of Buenos Aires, where tertiary buildings coexist with big open portions of land and small houses. So by rotating the new house, it is possible to conquer long and open views and connect the air that is delivered by this piece of landscape from the neighbor with the new house and its private courtyard. So in the ground floor, they had this. They have some needs for a connection. Here, this is the existing house, and from this path, they can access both houses. Also, the cars stands there. But this is all again the piece of landscape that you can see. We see it's like 4 meters by 8 meters. It's something very small, but it's very carefully and lovely maintained. It's very important for them. So this small landscape started to structure their lives in the everyday. So by elevating the new house, we also can provide some intimacy for the main rooms of both houses. So accepting the challenge and taking care of how can the new building join to this ongoing conversation that started with this little garden. So again, very simple details. And the interior of the new house is a big portion of air where the furniture plays a very important role to define how it is used. And the big glass front is organized with the two types of glass just to provide the required intimacy needed for the both families. Then again, in the last room, the terrace, is an open-air observatory where both families can share an experience and rediscover their own neighborhood, this time from another point of view that was not shown before.
So, as Sebastián commented in the introduction, Buenos Aires is made of plots that facilitate its regenerations for various reasons that we are thankful of. There is a solid confidence of the citizens in their architects. So if you agree to take certain risks, you can participate in the construction of your city. In this way, the project expands considerably. It begins much earlier because it includes the question of where to do it and what to do, issues that are usually given to us before starting to work. This is the first building that we managed to build under the methodology of fideicomiso. What we do is look for a piece of land that is for sale. Then we make a project, and then we start to look for possible interested parties. Sometimes it works, many times it doesn't. Sometimes we do a project, we manage to find the interested people, and when we try to build the land somebody has bought before us. But what we do is, in this first one, we choose an area of the city where it made sense to build small units, units that were in tune with the small investor that we were able to group at that time. It is a very simple and economical building where the first block rises and connects the street for a circulation patio. The interesting thing this method of work is that the first thing that appears is the project. The architecture then has the possibility of placing itself between your practice agenda and the public's needs, using Richard Rorty's word. If this balance of private obsessions and public's need is not 100% balanced, the construction of the project does not happen, or the architecture has no interest. This space speaks of this double condition. Some can see here a parking lot, another a common ground in continuity with the public space. Some may see here a space for home or place for working, while we only care about creating spaces that increase our freedom, unrelated to any specific use or any specific inhabitant. We ask ourselves how a building of which we don't know its use should be presented to the city, or how this programmatic uncertainty can be positively impact in its formalization. This is another kind of curtain wall. It's a curtain wall that has curtains in the front. It has a glass 1 meter behind, a vegetation in the middle. The last studio that we did together and in the University of Buenos Aires was called Workshop for Project Techniques Actualizations. The projects, we believe that the project is a form of knowledge. We believe that you can learn and use other architects' design techniques, knowing that they won't fit perfectly in your present scenario. So that little difference produces a small forward movement, always rooted in the discipline, but stimulated by day. So if at the end of the day, the only thing that we are offering is a modified volume of air, how can we project the conditions of that interior atmosphere? So the design of the envelope becomes a key moment of the project. So in this case, the shadow device and the vegetation are incorporated, so the air enters to this room, lowers its temperature and increases the humidity. This programmatic uncertainty is opposed to a clear spatial specificity. For us, this is the condition to promote a creative way of living. And also from this point of view, the space organization is dramatically simplified. You can come back to it with a total different perspective. For us, it's a shortcut to structure envelope. And then it's possible to concentrate efforts on proposing another generation of buildings able to dialogue with the natural environment of the city. So maybe this project is the crystallization of this agenda that we call moving from the mixed use to the diffuse. If in the mixed use you already know the cocktail of the uses of the program that the building is going to have, and you have to develop design technique to organize a complex building. The diffuse, it's a completely different thing. What you have to do is to offer open spaces, then left a creative margin to the users to define the final use. This is a new version of the elevated gardens, now with 2 meters width. This is another version of an hybrid and ventilated curtain wall. This building is a collection of stacked rooms open to different appropriations. This is one of those gardens and one of the rooms. So behind that permeable curtain wall, behind that elevated garden, and behind the glass, again, what we are offering is a big volume of air circulating from side to side, waiting for its occupation. So the plan is organized in strips, the technical in the middle, the gardens in the perimeter, and the open space in between. The roughness of these constructions changes radically when it is appropriated by its inhabitants. They can have a workplace like this, or they can dwell like this. Another important idea for this point of view is that the furnitures decrease the use. This is now a house only because the thing we found inside. But to doing so, you have to offer big unregulated open spaces. We have to step back a little as architects and let life, with all its surprises and contradictions, come inside our organizations. This could be a typology evolution of the kind of building that Buenos Aires is made of. A more permeable one, and open to different appropriations.
Well, this is a typical urban the existing neighborhoods with very good spatial and infrastructural conditions are growing and are receiving a new density. So these new buildings share the street with single-family homes, also with attached houses, as you can see here in the neighborhood. Although this new density, it brings the neighborhood a clear residential mood. So here the typology of buildings Marcelo was introducing before, they do not fit here. It's very different. This is a very completely different urban atmosphere with different needs. So the inhabitants of buildings are people who accept this densification process, but partially, because they understand that this is needed to attend the growth of our civilization, the growth of the city, and of course they want to live near their work, and they know the city is the place to live, but they still keep the wish of inhabiting a house. So this group of projects I'm going to show you is an essay about how can we build density attending to the people's domestic dreams. As you can see in the section here, this building is taking the advantage of the low height permitted by the code, and we decided to divide the building here in the middle. You can see this line, providing a big portion of air to the upper houses and a big portion of land to the lower houses. So we can introduce these spaces, these exterior spaces to the interior of each apartment, and offer a building that could be understood as the grouping of small houses. So the characteristic of the deep and narrow plots of the city enable the appearance of inner courtyards like this one, where the circulation of the building is shared with private rooms. And this courtyard needs to be very, very well calibrated, because in this space coexist these different programs that are some very public with some very private, and also require a living code between the users. So the units are very neat and narrow, are like the units like the l'unité habitationnelle de Marcel, but in this case with a double front and a connection of air through the units. And again, they have open vertical spaces that connects the inhabitants, but also the air and the views in this vertical situation. And then, once again, the open air rooms where you can take a look of the city and to expand your own private life. But then the displacement of the society from the banks and the private sector resulted to be a very good opportunity for developers. So they took the lead on this, and they started to professionalize this trust, the fideicomiso Marcelo was talking. They introduced now an intelligence of their multidisciplinary teams with economists, lawyers, engineers, and they professionalized the system. Of course, this is possible because the scale of this building is bigger. And it also, but because it's also increased the scale of the budgets of the buildings. But also because of the scale of these buildings, these buildings have the ability to bring a new value to some sectors of the city that were not seen before with the interest. So this is an opportunity to capture the interest of the society to live again in the city and to come back from the suburbs. So in this case, by doing a redescription of its neighbor here, which is 4 or 5 townhouses, we are now introducing a new density and doing the same. It's just the same plot, but with the double density. So now the building takes the advantage of being located in front of this generous public space and facing its main rooms to it, but also offering a compact building with a light and vibrating facade that works as if it were a backdrop curtain for the existing trees. Always the trees and the building doing this dynamic dialogue. And the organization is again one single block facing to the public space, and the section is divided again in the middle. But in this case, the houses here owns the air. But to have some more privacy, we elevated all the building to have a connection for the lower houses. So all the units are organized to earn a diaphanous connection between the front and the back, and turning the interior into a place that can be understood as an interstitial space between the square, the public space, and the private interior courtyard. Then the common spaces are reduced to its minimum, and the units can be understood as a sequence of layers from their own private courtyards through the interior, then the green private garden connected to the public landscape. Then all the glass devices are designed to introduce big portions of air into the interiors, but also slightly protected in the outside, in the outside skin, to obtain the needed intimacy for the street. As in the other buildings, as we have these conditions that you're in the 4th floor, you're just over the trees, and you have the connections to the street just over the trees, but you have always a big portion of sky. And for the last project in these areas, it is a whole new urbanization that we were invited by a private developer to build the first mid-density block of the development. The block is next to the existing square, that is the civic plaza, the civic square of the neighborhood, and the main institutional building of the new city. So instead of thinking the block as a consolidated solid, we worked with a group of buildings arranged in such a way that the central open space could be open and shared. Also, each building is positioned to build a specific relationship with its surroundings. So you have this building that connects and dialogues with the existing plaza. Then this is the building that makes a dialogue with the views of the lake, and the inner townhouses that starts a new development for the rest of the landscape. So each of the 3 buildings are designed for a very precise type of inhabitants with different needs, different types of access to the units. The buildings are also a evolution of some other experiences we had before, like the diffuse Marcelo was talking in this case with the plaza building, that is all units that are again with this connected there from one side to the other, and a small core that can be modified to be just a small apartment or a working place, and the connection between these blocks through the garden roof. And then the other building that is a building with apartments with a very big portion and generous expansions to stimulate the domestic life in contact with the views and the landscape. Them always introducing some commercial spaces and leisure spaces that are located to activate the use of the future public space. And between these spaces that are public, we have these small townhouses with the public programs in the corner. So the buildings are, as I said before, a small evolution with some other conditions that are changing the materiality and the details. And between them, they have different materializations, and the same way, each building can present itself, but of course, they are similar in construction techniques.
So the second request that Lev did was to select a fictional figure to collaborate with. So we felt that was a good opportunity to bring back a character that we designed at the beginning of our practice that we call the contemporary constructor. We liked the idea at that time of the constructor, not just a builder, a constructor, or talking about construction in a bigger sense, not just related to architecture. So it's a point of view that it's at the same time cultural and material. So the project has two parts. One, it's a manifesto, and the other is the installation that we are seeing here. That is a translucent and fragile human figure that changes all the time depending on the environment. So it's very malleable, but it has a position and a direction. It's moving forward. So we'd like to finish this presentation. Sorry, there is a third question we are going to talk about. We want to talk about the second part of this project, that it's a manifesto that actually doesn't stand for any in particular.
We are going to read. Okay. The contemporary constructor walks down the hallway of a hotel. Countless rooms pass him. In one of them, a person can be found writing an unfaded book. In the following, someone on their knees begging for faith and strength. In a third, a chemist investigating a body's properties. In a fourth, the visioning of an idealistic metaphysical, and in a fifth, the demonstration of the possibility of metaphysics. All share the same hallway. The contemporary constructor must pass through it if he wishes to have a feasible way of entering his own room.
The contemporary constructor understands the world as a collection of particular facts in perpetual motion, not a puzzle whose pieces will reveal the whole when pieces one to another. He describes it as a mosaic without adhesive, with three multiple loose pieces that are valuable both independent and in relation to other, forming different changing associations and connections.
The contemporary constructor abandons certainty and objectivity as the goal of thinking. He sets himself inside an heterogeneous and unstable context and does it with certain optimism. understanding that instability and heterogeneity aren't avoidable accidents, but beautiful creative materials, the shining object of contemporary imagination.
The contemporary construction dedicates most of his time linking his private ambitions to public needs.
The contemporary constructor leaves the city, the common place for those who don't have anything in common.
The contemporary constructor constantly broadens his relational network. He knows that if he only knows the neighborhood people, will get stuck in the lexicon in which he was educated. Therefore, he tries to acquire knowledge of constructors and known techniques and environments.
The contemporary constructor employs his needs to produce as a perfect excuse to study. A studio is a place to study.
The contemporary constructor always talks with history. Without memory, his innovation turned to mere novelty. History grants his growth directions, but since his memory is never perfect, every memory becomes a composite or degraded image of a previous situation or moment. In this way, each memory is always new, a partial construction and different from its origin, and as such with potential for his own growth.
The contemporary constructor knows that almost every object can someday become occasionally important. He understands the advantage of possessing a general reserve of extra truth or ideas that would be real in merely possible situations. The contemporary constructor stores those extra truths in his memory and fills his consultation books with the surplus. When one of those extra truths turns pragmatically relevant for some of these emergencies, it comes out of its cold conservation to act in the world, and his belief in it becomes active.
The contemporary constructor holds a way of thinking that doesn't establish itself as a negation of other conceptions. He crosses them in a singular way, adopts them to build a particular conversation, until lighting a new lexicon whose validity doesn't rest in truth but in verisimilitude, its ability to create in others the effect of truth through experience.
The contemporary constructor builds new words and constantly expands his lexicon. He maintains that new circumstances require a new way of thinking, which in turn requires new forms of expression. His way of expressing himself generates new circumstances.
The contemporary constructor has the ability to formulate his idea without the need to impose any in particular. His argument should be as ignorable as interesting.
The contemporary constructor stands on the shoulders of others. He reaches farther, piggybacked on the triumphs of those preceding him, and the views are much better.
The contemporary constructor often imitates. He comes as close to the original as he can because he knows that he will never reach it entirely and that the difference will be remarkable. He reminds us how underestimated this disaccredited and fructiferous imitation result as technique.
The contemporary constructor maintains a parasitic relationship with its precursors, but because he is conscious of the fact that he will only be able to bring to light a small part of himself. He trusts in the benevolence of all those strangers that encounter him in the future.
The contemporary constructor converts theories into instruments for support and not into responses to enigma. He doesn't recline on them. He moves forward and sometimes reconstructs the nature with their help. The contemporary constructor gives all our theories flexibility. He revitalizes them and puts each of them to work.
The contemporary constructor doesn't want to have a defined position, but he knows how to get strength from his theoretic weakness. Because his posture is lax, it's difficult to attack him. But because one doesn't know exactly what he maintains, it's also impossible to stand by his flag. The contemporary constructor proposes just one way of thinking things, perhaps an insistence in the concrete. So it is not easy, but his idea becomes a substitute for what he fights against. So these descriptions are made with text, arguments, and disposals from other contemporary constructors. For the end, we have another third question. This is very difficult because I'm going to read it because
yeah.
Do you
I don't have to.
Yeah, okay. No, my answer. The question. I mean.
The question. Okay.
If you remember.
No, I know it. Yes.
Okay.
Of course, if you thought it would be possible to respond it. You're like a Lars von Trier movie. There's so many restrictions. The first is that we have to find a contemporary architect and a collaborator to work with it. I don't know why, but I choose Lacaton and Basal, and I would love to see how they mix with the Ramones. Don't ask me why. Maybe because how the both have an ongoing agenda that made very simple changes from one work to another, and also because I like them.
Well, I know the collaborator. I will talk first about the collaborator for the architects, because I choose 3 offices, contemporary offices that I think are doing well, and I would like to say. And the collaborator is Buenos Aires. I would like to see their practice in Buenos Aires to be very proximate because our works are now developed there. I would invite Bruder, Soil, and MOS architects. It would be very intriguing for me to see how they develop in this place.
We are.
Thank you.
We are open.